Hi class! In this third installment, we're going to be talking about family environment and how that might influence psychopathology. So again, these are all just models, but they help us understand a little bit more about causes and what maintains these psychological disorders. So first, in this family environment, let's talk about the early relationships that children will have with their caregivers. And one of the things that we know is that children develop an attachment or a bond between themselves and their caregivers. Children can develop either a secure or an insecure attachment style. If they have a secure attachment, they feel very safe, they feel like they can explore the environment that they're in, and that their needs will be met. In an insecure attachment style, babies and children may be a little unsure about whether or not their needs will be met in the future. As you can imagine, an insecure attachment might be related to something like anxiety. If you're unsure about whether or not your needs will be met, you may be anxious about whether or not you'll have your needs met. And this creates an internal working model. So basically a schema or thoughts about what relationships should look like. So let me just show you a little picture because I think it's really, one, cute, it's a cute little doodle, but two, I think it really describes what that internal working model is. So that baby is starting to develop a thought about their relationships. So when I'm sad, is somebody going to come and help me out? And if so, I feel loved, I feel like I can regulate my emotions, I can feel a little bit better. And then they're going to take that model and apply that to new relationships in their life. This is a very busy schematic, but what it demonstrates is that insecure attachment are risk factors so that they might cause things like different disorders later on. So in this, we might have, if you have a lot of attachment anxiety, you may have a higher level of negative affect or more negative emotions that you're feeling. And so you might perceive the world as chronically threatening. This may help explain why people develop anxiety disorders. You are not going to need to know all of this model, but the thing that I just want you to understand is how can attachment actually influence later internalizing and externalizing disorders, and it may be through different types of processes or how you're feeling about different things. We also know that parenting behaviors, so the ways in which parents actually parent, might influence some of a child's development of difficulties with emotion regulation, for example. So we can think about global interactions. So one of the things that we know is that a parent who is depressed is more likely to have a depressed child. Well, one of the things that might influence that is actually how that parent is interacting with their child. So something that we commonly do as an experiment and in research is something called the still face paradigm. This is supposed to model what it's like for a child who is whose parent is experiencing depression, that they may not show as much positive or negative affect, but instead it might be like a still face. And you'll see how distressing this might actually be for an infant. So let's watch that video.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So while this was just an experiment, it really does demonstrate how sensitive infants are to parental distress and parents' own interactions, and it may influence how that child grows up. I had a really interesting experience in grad school where I actually worked with a parent and child in a research context, and this baby just mirrored mom's emotions. Mom had very flat affect, didn't smile much, didn't interact much, and this baby mirrored that too. This baby was not very serious. And it took repeated interactions with the baby and mom to get a little bit more interaction going on. And so mom's own experiences of emotions might actually influence how the baby's experiencing emotions as well. In addition, parenting style also might have a pretty big impact on children, right? So we can think about Baumrine's parenting styles, whether or not there's authoritative, permissive, authoritarian, or uninvolved parenting. These things may influence how children are view the world as well. So a more strict or authoritarian parent that has a little bit more of that, power dynamics, a little bit more emotionally distant, might have children that grow up to be slightly more anxious. Or, on the other hand, also grow up to be a little bit more rebellious. So those things might influence whether or not children develop disorders. So let's apply this now to Valerie's case. What type of interactions is she having with her parents? As you can see, one is completely uninvolved. Father is not really in the picture. However, mom is also a little bit uninvolved, not a lot of monitoring going on. She was able to slip by with some of those. It was very easy to do drugs and alcohol, and mom didn't really notice. So those things might make it a little bit easier for her to continue to use alcohol and drugs, might make it so that she continues to use these things. Something I want to avoid here is always blaming the parent. We often have this culture of parents are the reason for their kids acting certain ways, and I want us to avoid that. Most parents are doing the best they can with the resources that they have and the tools that they have. Some of it might be you don't know any better because you were raised in a certain way. Other parents, it may be really hard for them to interact with their children because they're dealing with their own traumas. So I just want to put that out there, that this is not to blame parents. Bad parenting is not the only cause of psychological disorders. And so there may be contributions to parenting style that may contribute to a disorder. But I want to say again, it is not only parenting that's to blame for psychological disorders. So let's move on into the broader world and talk a little bit about sociocultural models and how that might explain some things. So these are more distal or distantly related risk factors that can affect a child's ability to interact in the world. There are things like socioeconomic status that can really affect a child in multiple ways. So parents' education, their income level, for example, might influence how much a child is able to get the help that they need. So in Valerie's case, she may not have been able to get the help that she needed early on in school to be successful. Maybe part of that is due to going and attending a school that is in a lower class neighborhood and not having as many resources as somebody from a higher class neighborhood. And what we know is that socioeconomic status is a risk factor. So lower socioeconomic status is a risk factor for psychopathology. So part of it might just be access to care. So if we have less access to care, we may be more at a higher risk of actually developing a psychological disorder. Bromford-Brunner's bioecological model really puts this in perspective. And your book does a good job of kind of laying out the microsystem, so who we're interacting with on a more daily basis, like our schools, our daycares, and our families are going to have a lot more impact on us psychologically than things that are out there in the macro system, like our culture. But all of these things are influences on that child. So even things that occur over the course of our lifespan, right? When we experience a trauma, so a trauma that happened when you were 1 year of age, you might not remember that. And well, more likely than not, you don't remember that. So it might not have as much long-lasting impacts on you. However, if you have a big significant trauma that happens when you're 15, that may be more likely to stay with you for a little bit longer. So those changes that happen over my life course, or even how we're raised now compared to 20 years ago, those things might have an influence. But, things like our exosystem and our economic status and where we live, all of those things can have an impact. So to just sum this up and put it all in context, what we know is that there are multiple influences on whether or not a child will develop a disorder, whether or not they will experience relief eventually. And we can look at these through multiple levels of analysis. So we can start from very basics of our genes, our brain, our neurotransmitters that are going on, as well as, how we're thinking about the world, our actions or our behaviors. And then we have to consider the broader context of what's going on in my family and then what's going on in the world and how that's actually influencing me. So all of these things can be contributors to psychological disorders. So I hope you're able to really reflect on this, see what you feel based on Valerie's case study. All right. Hope you have a good rest of your day.